Welcome to the secret live stream. Order and chaos, chaos and order, masculine and feminine. We've all heard these terms, and that's what this live stream is about. It's about the interplay between order and chaos. And this interplay between the masculine and feminine, which is order and chaos, it's the same thing, is what actually creates awareness. Consciousness itself and all of its manifestations can't exist without this constant relationship between the masculine and feminine, order and chaos. So what's chaos? Chaos is that undifferentiated pool of mystery. It's the mystery. It's the void of undifferentiation. Chaos is the state you find yourself in when you experience a series of discordant thoughts, emotions, or feelings, right? You're feeling inner chaos. But chaos itself is not evil, is not the reason for destruction. Chaos is the foundation of everything in the universe, because as most mythologies state, it is the void which springs forth the all. It is that mystery which springs forth the revelation. So chaos, and equally the feminine, is the mystery, whereas order, or the masculine, is the revelation. Order is what happens when the fertile ground of chaos is pulled from in order to create something finite, something that can be interacted with in a specific way. And because of this, there is a responsibility to acknowledge that both order and chaos are to be pulled from and integrated at all times. The problem is, in these very strange times we find ourselves in, either too much chaos is emphasized or too much order, too much masculine energy or too much feminine energy. So because the feminine is chaos, the healthy feminine is the rock of all divine creation that springs forth. The divine feminine is grounded, receptive, reflective, loving, compassionate, supportive, vulnerable, authentic, and flows through life effortlessly. And this is not only about women. We're talking about energies here. Now, without the aspect of being, no divine creation can be upheld. And that's why we always say you need a foundation in chaos, which is another way of saying your comfort in chaos, your level of comfort in chaos is hand in hand with how much you have looked into your own void, and from that learned what true divinity is. When we see chaos, right, that undefinable, right, the undefinable aspect of anything, when we see chaos as something that is purely destructive or something that is too whimsical, that is when we get into an overly ordered kind of way of interacting with ourselves and the world. And too much order, too much masculine energy is this stale energy. It's rigid, it is overly logical, and it is inauthentic to the point that its own authenticity is confused with the finite nature of its being, not recognizing that when you set aside the feminine, you no longer have this cheerleader, because the feminine, and again, we're talking about, yes, women, we could, but these are energies. Man, woman, masculine energy, masculine, feminine, don't get them confused. So without the cheerleader of the feminine, the masculine is subject to walking life without observing its inherent spontaneity, its inherent levity, and it leads to a condition of stagnation. So the condition of too much chaos obviously leads to confusion, right? Too much mental health disruptions, a lot of times physical health disruption. Anytime you are in that void of chaos, while it can seem like either you're eating yourself up or you don't have discipline or something, that void has so much to teach us. The idea of security has been huge here, having to secure a proper life, having to secure a proper way of functioning. Security, after all, is what we all long for, but that's not true. Ease and flow and connection is what we long for. And if we want to barricade ourselves under the intimidation of what chaos is, of the feminine, then we discard our own fertile ground. And equally, as we said, when the feminine is ignoring the masculine, that is when we have an energy of directionlessness, of aimlessness, of purposelessness. So the interplay between chaos and order, between the mystery and the revelation, is crucial in understanding how you operate and in understanding how this entire matrix functions. All of the secrets lie in this integration. And in your own awakening journey, there is much to be held. You can hold certain realizations you've had. You can touch them. But equally, there are many energies that you cannot identify, that you can never touch or hold. And for a lot of us, we have confused this with not knowing what's happening, right? Like if we don't get an exact ordered answer, then how can order with chaos actually lead us to this sense of freedom? When we combine the masculine and feminine, we see freedom in a new light. We don't just see freedom in a way in which we have to control everything and order everything to the point where spontaneity is blocked off and we become stagnant creatures of habit. But equally, we don't have to worship the feminine and chaos in such an imbalanced way that we are holding ourselves hostage to emotion, to these mysterious energies that are there to be felt. They're not there to be defined. Osho has a really good quote. And this goes for women and the feminine energy. Women are not to be understood. Women are to be loved. At first glance, I think many men out there would think this is kind of foolish, right? Why love something that you can't understand? And it's simply because chaos is the undefinable. So the energy which lifts up the feminine and integrates it into order is one of allowance. It's not one that can demand receptivity. You see, if you want a healthy feminine energy to exist within you, then you must remain receptive. And I've learned this the hard way many times. Maybe you have too. And equally, can we balance that with creating strong, healthy boundaries for ourselves, for our ideas, for our energies? This is where the magic lies. It really is. Unfortunately, in the conversation of awakening, the divine masculine, the concept of order has been severely dampened. Everybody is very familiar with this idea that it's the rise of the divine feminine, and that the feminine is the focal point of these new Aquarian energies that are coming in. And while the feminine is not to be discarded at all during this time, neither is the masculine. We can embrace a very strong type of love, a very potent sort of spirituality that is not here or there. So that's what we're talking about. We have stopped being vulnerable as we walked off with fear and reason. Yes, absolutely. And reason can only go so far. You know, we need logic and reason and fragmentation as much as we need what tools the void of chaos has to offer. But can you break down everything and figure out its inherent essence? Sometimes, but not usually. If I break a model airplane, if I destroy a wall, sure, it becomes something else. But now there's no function, or there's a different function to it. It's like sometimes seeing things holistically is actually the only door into your heart. Sometimes it's not. And this is an interesting concept for those who have never heard it. We can actually be so enveloped in the journey of becoming free that we put aside the revelation that can be funneled through the mystery. And so should you see things holistically always? Well, yes and no. Every concept and every template we talk about, like order, chaos, feminine, masculine, it's only relevant if it's relevant in your life. Like for one who has no issue with this balance between order and chaos, you know, it's funny that any balancing would have to occur. Many will say that this matrix is the result of a purely overly masculine, overly bureaucratic and rigid consciousness. And it's easy to see this because, well, all of the structures in place are void of empathy, are void of a true receptive nature. There's no real nurturing from any of the societal and cultural structures in place. So because of this, it's appeared that the masculine energy reigns and the feminine has been left on the back burner. This is not the case. What we observe here is both a manifestation of the toxic masculine, too much order, and the toxic feminine, too much chaos. Because our collective spirit chose separation consciousness, and therefore what was healthy interplay became toxic rivalry. This toxic rivalry is very clear. So do you see true order out there? You actually don't. This is order in a chaotic fashion. Everything makes sense if you don't question it, right? The system seems in place and infallible when you first observe it, but the more you dive into it, you realize it's all ran by chaos. It's all ran by the inability to look into the collective shadow or sub and unconscious. It's the same thing. Many of us are also very used to the void. It's pretty common in truther and spiritual circles for us to be most comfortable in this space where everything is always undefinable and there is never one revelation or another. And this is a condition that is being corrected right now. And the point is, there is divine order. There is divine order. When we can be first, we can then do. Right? We can't do without being. When we can absorb energies and let them come without really understanding what they will create, when we can accept that is when the innate creation just pops off. Isn't matriarchy the way of nature versus patriarchy? Yeah, well, we're on Mother Earth. We're rooted in the fertile ground of chaos. That's a given, and that's why our collective condition, it has this relationship with Gaia in which she creates natural equivalents to our inner condition, and this is why we have a lot of natural disasters, and we have lots of natural disruptions. A lot of us, we focus so much on perhaps like man-made weather control. I won't touch on that, but there is just as much natural phenomenon that is reflecting to us our our inner. So if we all are born from the womb of our mothers, then ultimately chaos is where we dissolve back into, always. We always retreat back into the void. You have to go back to the void to bathe yourself, to bathe ourselves in nothingness, which is the same thing as everything. And then after experiencing nothingness and everything simultaneously, we go back to the drawing board, which is order. And by the way, I will be posting this live stream for those who don't have time right now to stick around. Now, while the universe is a matriarchal sort of system, that doesn't mean the universe can only operate on a feminine timeline. It can't, and equally, nothing can be achieved when that is suppressed. So we're here to purge, we're here to learn, and these concepts of order and chaos are super necessary. Now, the wounded feminine is extremely insecure and looks for external validation. We observe this. Maybe you're a woman watching this. Maybe you have women in your life. You know, there is an insecurity virus which has been inserted into the Metatronic grid. And therefore, the wounded female searches for validation to cover up that insecurity, when really the healthy feminine is there to be that validating force, and not only validate others, but equally validate itself. So in the state of wounded feminine, that insecurity turns into a critical nature of one's loved ones, right? Nobody can do anything right. The wounded feminine criticizes, mostly because too much chaos results in an overly emotional, frantic state, which is the same thing as a reactive state. And energy extraction is in part the result of reaction. Now, the wounded feminine can also confuse itself into thinking that its overconnection is the true integration. So the imbalanced feminine oftentimes overconnects and overshares emotions and desires and needs. And this is because when order isn't integrated, that pool, it's overwhelming. And so the immediate response for the wounded feminine, and we're talking about men and women too, guys. We're not talking about just women. In these situations of overconnection, the feminine does not realize that there is a foundation in that, and that foundation can settle. It doesn't have to always rise up, right? So that's why many self-help coaches will give this advice. You know, don't blurt out everything that comes out of your mouth. Don't express every bit of energy that flows through you, because everything is flowing through you. And it is your responsibility. It's the responsibility of the divine masculine to set boundaries and know what energies are to be emphasized, what energies are to be kind of put in their place, and what energies are to be cast aside. So the wounded feminine feels like a victim. The wounded feminine feels desperate for love. And the wounded feminine prioritizes others at her own expense. So we're not just talking about a one-dimensional, the feminine is only there to nurture. It's like sometimes there's such thing as tough love, right? You can nurture in a variety of different ways. It doesn't always have to be a stroke of the hand, but that's often what the feminine offers. And come on, we love that. Let's talk about the wounded masculine now, the unhealthy masculine. The unhealthy masculine is competitive, is overly attached to success and conquest, right? The wounded masculine, too much order, avoids connection and chooses to be cold and distant. Surprisingly, this sounds like a feminine trait, but it's actually a toxic masculine trait. Taking things too personally. The wounded masculine takes things too personally because the focus on rigidity has no time for the fucking void of chaos. That is too undifferentiated to be concerned with. And so there is a feeling of personal attack when chaos aims to whisper in the wounded masculine's ear. And because of this, the wounded masculine is obsessed with defending itself and also with attacking itself, attacking others, accusation. So obviously this imbalance pulls us away from love, pulls us away from connection. What's outside the simulation? Well, outside of the simulation is the perfect interplay between order and chaos. So we can simply say divine creation, Hyperborea, Shambhala, a hyper-dimensional playground that is not limited by any of these imbalances. The macrocosmic situation is a complete canvas, not only in how you interpret it, but how you push it along. This is a secret. This is the idea of timelines. That your decisions and your intention are constantly combining and shifting you into, well, new timelines. Maybe you see how this all ends, and yet you're still walking in a semi-state of amnesia. I feel the same way. It's a little strange to observe the process from within and from above. simplicity is always going to reap us a result that is rooted in ease, in flow. Keep it easy, keep it easy. So there is a simplicity in recognizing the necessity of combining the divine aspect of order and the divine aspect of chaos. It's another way to say the best creations unfold when you know when to create and when to pull out, right? When to intentionally use your energies and when to allow all that you are to fall into place to open up another door. As we divide away from oneness and the spirit, we experience individuality and thus fear and ego and masculine versus feminine. But that's a game, an illusion. Absolutely. There's no battle between the masculine and feminine that needs to be upheld. And while this is not the source, right? We're not existing in that source state right now. That doesn't mean this division between masculine and feminine is actually allowing for a new birth. And we talk about this being a womb, the womb of the Great Mother, Sophia. It is a game. It is an illusion to separate the feminine and masculine, but it is not an illusion to distinguish the beneficial aspect of both energies. And this is something that I find many have been maybe intimidated to do. When you separate something, when you create a split, we're talking about pulling complementary opposites into division. So if we have the ability to play a game of division, then the very force which repelled order and chaos away from each other is the very force that is going to reintegrate them. Thank you to everybody who is joining us on this secret live stream. We would all be lying if we said the masculine didn't feel threatened by the feminine, and the feminine oftentimes didn't feel threatened by the masculine. It's because you carry both energies, but in this lifetime, one has usually been more pronounced than another in any given period, right? A period of immense depression or immobilization or confusion or maybe stress. Well, that's chaos. That's chaos. What about this feeling of disconnection? This feeling of coldness, right? This feeling of detachment. That's it's too much masculine. Enjoy fear and division. Watch yourself hurt and bleed, because soon you will outgrow both and not even remember them. Yes, well, that is one of the strongest statements of wisdom. It's that you can't retreat from the own division you inflicted yourself. You inflicted onto yourself once upon a time. So you're going to burn. And same with me, until everything is burnt away that is not of integration and unity. And again, we go back to this idea that just because there is integration doesn't mean we can't make a distinction. Like, don't at all fear focusing on maybe a little bit of order for a while, or a bit of chaos, if that is an energetic quality that you need to help resurface. There's nothing wrong with blocking out and even ignoring different layers of your experience in order to harness a gift or create resolution. So fear itself teaches us the perils of what happens when order and chaos oppose each other and themselves. The feminine is okay with not knowing. And many of the living souls are being called now to embrace the lack of specific clarity, right? Because you know what's happening. Order wants to define everything. But when you can sit back and enter the unknown and enter a comfortable state whilst in the unknown, then everything makes sense in its nonsensical state. And this is why the overly masculine practices of psychology and psychiatry and anything having to do with analyzing the human condition, philosophy, it's all missing the point. It's missing the point. And the funny thing about trying to define the experience, the human experience, in such a way is that it ends up becoming more chaos than order, right? I mean, flip into any existential philosophical work. It is ordered, but it is a chaotic order. What if I feel like I can't burn anymore? I'm really tired of all the purging and all this inversion here. I want to experience only what myself wants already. I'm tired of inversion of myself. Remember, everything you experience is you. And this gnosis can hurt us when we're not in full responsibility. The idea that what arises is all, it's all you, boo. So what if you feel like you can't burn anymore? Well, it's not really your conscious choice to burn. It hasn't been. I mean, if you ask a 5-year-old if they want to have years of pain before they reach what some would call enlightenment, he or she will say no. That absolutely not. So you never intended for any of this burning to occur consciously. It's just collectively our energetics created such a state, a condition in which the only option now is get assimilated or burn off what isn't us. And we're going to burn off what isn't us. Assimilation is a very distant kind of timeline, which, you know, which that possibility is closing up more and more. Now, when we feel like we have no options, we are not recognizing the malleability of existence, and we're not recognizing divine action that can be taken. So in the case of anything that feels suffocating, we have the option to allow ourselves to move the energy, right? When things get too stagnant and we identify with that stagnation, we end up trying to dissolve ourselves. So that doesn't work. A few videos ago, we talked about you're not here to dissolve, you're here to integrate, you know, to actually strengthen yourself. If you're still here and breathing, that means you're in it completely, consensually. So we can allow the void of chaos to overwhelm us. Like, oh, I can't burn anymore. Everything is too overwhelming. Yes, it's overwhelming only if we're not recognizing there's energies to be moved. There are actions to be taken, divine actions too, not just empty actions. There are freedoms we inherently have, and there are options. And again, one of the biggest resources we have is consent. So if you don't want to feel pain, then you actually consent to suppression, right? I can't burn anymore. I can't do all of this purging. You know what I say? Bring it on, higher self. Bring it on, oh ancient ones. I'm ready. Bring me any underlying imbalances within my being. Slap them in front of me and let me deal with them. So, sister, you want to experience only what yourself wants already, but if you don't allow yourself this malleability, then all we will see is the burning and not the end result from that burning, which is Phoenix rising from the ashes. You can either fight or surrender and make the best out of everything. Indeed, surrender is crucial, but many, including myself at one point or another, have identified surrender as giving up, as letting some other force take the reins. But this isn't the case. This isn't the case at all. You can allow yourself to surrender, because in surrendering, you maintain that nothing can harm you. When we say harm is out there and it is something to protect against, we are actually creating a psychic adhesive to that very state we're trying to repel away from us. Now, that's not to say don't be discerning. You know, I'm not saying sit in a cloud of new agey love and light. Have boundaries, of course, but remember, anything we fight within us, minute or large, it ends up festering. That's why Jesus says, you know, the pathway to heaven is very narrow. The path into the gates of New Jerusalem, it's narrow. And I would actually say, no. It's not a pathway. It's a fucking peephole. We have this idea of the Big Bang, right? Which is really the same thing as the explosion of the 0 point, or source descending from oneness into fractalization. So anything left unturned in our lives is going to sit in our psyche as a sort of weight and as a sort of imbalance. And instead of fighting that through duality, we could actually enter that void of chaos. You see, duality, this division between what is good and evil, what is right and wrong, has affected us in part in such a way that we aren't comfortable with staring into that darkness, because it seems like in staring into that darkness, we are actually riding the pendulum swing into the territory of hell, or the territory of the negative, or the territory of the devil, when you needed to swing to both sides of the pendulum to find that centeredness. Here's a funny paradox. So imagine you are right here and there is a pendulum swinging from left to right, and the imbalanced frequencies of this division has created everything around you, and you are that 0 point at the center, observing the here, the there, the good, the bad, the chaos, and the order. But are you so certain that you're here to remain at that centered state? Or maybe it's like this. It's that while you're in that observation, you can take a ride on both sides. And in doing so, there is no longer just a center point right there. You see, when we talk about the toroidal field, we're talking about a temporary artificial structure. A lot of presentations on the toroidal field, probably most of them consider it like the most divine kind of geometric shape in creation. Well, it is divine, but it's the opposite of a golden age geometric shape, because we have the 0 point right here, either at the center of the earth or the center of the heart. And then everything else sort of spins around that one point. But what we're creating right now in this shift, in this massive awakening, is letting that 0 point duplicate itself eternally, right? So every ounce of creation is its own 0 point. And that is going to be achieved. Well, it's being achieved right now. When order and chaos fully converges. When Skeksis and Uru merge. Yes, beautifully said, baby. The Dark Crystal, if you haven't seen that movie, you guys already know. I am a Dark Crystal fanboy. For anyone who is seriously into the Dark Crystal, come email me. We got some things to fanboy about. But the Skeksis in this movie and in the Netflix series represent too much order, and the Gelfling represent the energy extraction that comes from the Skeksis separation from the Uru, which is their wise counterpart, which is speaking of the wisdom from chaos. The 144,000 are emerging as parts of the movement that end up repairing, healing the collective psyche. Well, this is the whole idea of a light worker. While I acknowledge we are both light workers and dark workers, energetic work is, it's the work. It's the great work. Know that it is through the inner work and through our inner journey that we begin to heal the collective people. Yes, absolutely. We need to get together physically. Words are not enough for this. Well, speak for yourself. I've been traveling for years, meeting people and going on different trips and putting my energy into connecting. So Shadow Sun and anybody else, if connection is what you long for, we need to, first initiate that connection. Now, as far as coming together physically, many of us are very inspired right now to do that. And I am completely open to any future gatherings, any future get-togethers. Let's see what happens. But let us not confuse it. The work is being done. There is no have-tos in this process. If there's an inclination to physically get together, absolutely. Let's combine some energies, but know that the unfoldment does not end because there is a limit to what work can be done internally. There's really no limit to what you can accomplish within yourself. So once again, if connection is what we are longing for, then we first should offer that connection. We should be a vessel for that connection. People love throwing out the have-tos. Yes, they do. And this is because duality is a bitch. Like many of the spiritual concepts, most of them out there, how they're interpreted and how they're spoken of is in the realm of have tos, and it's in the realm of duality. You only know your own blueprint, and you only know what heals you. That's not to say you can't benefit others. Absolutely not. That doesn't mean there aren't protocols and, certain guidelines that can propel, but sterility is too much order. So when we're putting too much order into like the idea of spiritual growth, then that's avoiding chaos, right? When you say, you have to, for example, be a fruitarian to achieve, perfect enlightenment, right there. Even though the intention may have been all great, you just ignored chaos. The idea that it's never one method, one manifestation that will complete. So anyone who puts rigidity into awakening may be reflecting their own inability to stare into their own void. Equally, because again, we got to keep bouncing back and forth between order and chaos. We need not become hopeless pieces of flotsam. We need not just let the wind carry us without us being that wind. You know what I mean? And that's why in the last secret live stream, we talked about accepting that everything is given to you and nothing is given to you. At the same time, like when we can recognize the eternal truth in both of those statements, boom, that's when order and chaos can really shake hands. And thank you, Brandy. Yeah, thank you for the welcome backs. Not only you, but everyone who has welcomed me back. It is good to reconnect. I missed reconnecting with my brothers and sisters. Great little nuggets you're throwing out there. Yep, there is no progress without struggle. Yes, there is no transmutation without pressure. There is no enlightenment without endarkment. I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. Yes, and interestingly, this is the very phrase that Bible pushers will use to ascertain the superiority of Jesus. But Jesus Christ was not literally saying, I myself alone am the only way, the only truth, the only life. Jesus meant, that's when you acknowledge, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, then you have placed yourself back into that oneness whilst in individuation, right? It's like you can carry the infinite while being finite. However, that's not to say that struggle is the only condition here. This isn't just suffering. Like, this is the combination of heavenly plane projections and hellish plane projections. So that's why your memories are full of pleasure and pain. And sometimes there's been pain in the pleasure and pleasure in the pain. Aha! I'm really glad you brought that up, Christina. The idea that we need to diminish ourselves to attain the glory of God, right? How you say humble yourself is a vast oversimplification. Do whatever the fuck you will. Do what thou wilt, as long as it is not hurting yourself or others. That's the law. It's love above will. Love can manifest in endless fashion, but when many of us think of love, we have caricatured it into a sort of monastic, kind of timid sort of love. And that's not to say love can't be soft. You know, it can be bold, it can be quiet, it can be a whisper, it can be a shout. But the reason we are enamored by superheroes, you know, collectively, you know, these archetypes of superheroes and even celebrities, because celebrities are archetypes, and same with politicians. The reason, even on social media and on Truth or YouTube, there's certain figures that we, you know, we prop up, we raise up in our minds. It's because we actually love to worship ourselves and each other, to glorify everything in more of a superhero context, not in a hierarchical way. You know, it's express yourself, and without feeling like you're going to tear up any layer of yourself. We need to just be and try to see harmony, because it's happening all around us, even though it's hard to see sometimes. Sometimes we need to be, but sometimes we need to do. As within, so without also does mean as without, so within. We've heard this idea, fake it till you make it. And I'm not advocating inauthenticity, but there is value in knowing when to be and when to do. So it's not just be, it's not just do, it's not just chaos, and it's not just order. It's not just creativity, and it's not just logic. It's not just spontaneity, and it's not just security, for lack of a better word. It's both, exactly. And that is the whole purpose of this message. It's that, can you be all of it at once? Can you be both without choosing sides? What did that dream mean? I don't know. Maybe you'll define it. Maybe you won't. Either way, the dream is giving to you what the dreamer requires. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this secret live stream. Talk soon.